Hi guys, and welcome back to the Ferrari 308 carburetor rebuild project. In this video we will be looking at refitting the carburetors, balancing them back and front, side to side, and tuning them to the best of my abilities. Please remember, this is the first time I've ever done anything like this before, so mistakes were made, but I've learned a lot along the way. Obviously the build didn't go without its issues. At the end of the video I will recap on what I have learnt and what might be useful for you if you're undertaking anything like this again. So please stay tuned and have a look at that recap right at the end. Anyway, on with the video. First issue I had is I had all the carb nuts and washers sitting on their studs, and as I was cleaning I suddenly looked at this one and thought, okay, nut missing. It had fallen down the intake and was sitting on top of the valve, which I managed to get out. Again, could have been a disaster. While I've got everything out, I'm going to replace this section of fuel pipe. It seems to be the only one that's left of the old sort of braided type. So here we've got our new length of hose, which I've cut to length, or slightly over. You can see the difference between the two hoses. So yeah, let's get that in. Might be a bit tight in one of the brackets at the back there, but let's see how we get on. So that's the new fuel line in, and that's taken a lot longer than it should have done, but it's a job well worth doing whilst I'm in there. Next up, refitting those carbs. One thing to note when refitting the carburetor is you can't just drop it down onto the studs and then apply the washers and the nuts. As you see here, it's very tight on this back corner. This is the one that I was struggling with when removing those carburetors. If you place the carburetor fully down onto the studs, there's no space at the top for to fit the washer and the nut. So you need to do it gradually, dropping the carburetor down slowly, hook those first washer and nut over, let it drop down and slowly tighten those up. The other three follow on easily. I've now placed the last carburetor, and before I go any further, we've got these connecting rods coming through here. Might be easier to show you on the back one actually. So you've got this connecting rod, that's the cup, and then that's going to fit onto there. So I'm going to just put a little bit of grease. And then the last one of these cup joints is just on the end of the accelerator cable. Now all four carburetors are in, we reattach the fuel lines. Next up is the choke mechanism, which includes the cable from the car and the side-to-side cables connecting up these side carburetors. And lastly, the breather pipe connecting the front and rear banks. Next job is to turn on the ignition, get that fuel pump running, and just check for leaks. So things haven't quite gone according to plan. All the carburetors are back on, everything's hooked up. It was just waiting for me to fire it up and start the tuning. However, I had to go and visit my father, who's in hospital in Spain. Whilst I was there, I caught an infection in my hand and promptly had to come back and then have an operation on it. So the startup and the tuning is going to be somewhat delayed. The hand's still not back to normal, but I'm getting a bit keen to find out whether this is going to go or not. Just going to turn the ignition on, get the pump running, and then just check all those fuel hoses, make sure there's no leaks before I try and fire her up. Okay, fuel pump's kicked in. Very noisy on these cars. So just going to check. Everything's dry all around here. I can feel a little bit of fuel there actually. Got a gallon of fuel in it. Everything's been tightened up. Everything is put back as it should be, as far as I'm aware. So truth time. If I'm honest, I'm not really expecting it to start first time. Ignition on, ground control to Major Tom and all that. Oh wow, she's alive, she's alive! Right, so it's sounding rough, but first thing starts up really well, and I do feel after balancing the carbs front and back, I do feel as though it's running a lot better. There's still the final tuning to do. Still a little bit of popping and banging, but not as much since I took the idle mixture screws out 3 turns. So I think where I've been reading up, it says it prefers 308 prefers to run a little richer. Then I think that is helping. May need to loosen it a bit more, but we'll fiddle about with that. So I think the changes that I made yesterday have made a difference, and I really feel as though we're close. She starts on the button, which is something that was a real issue, and I couldn't get her to start at all before I started overhauling the carburetors. So yeah, I think we're there. But once she's warmed up, I'll get her back to the garage and have a bit more of a fettle, and yeah, see if we can get her running really well. Let's see how she sounds. She's nicely warmed over now and ticking over just over 1000 RPM. Still some pops and bangs from the exhaust, so I still think there's some minor adjustments we can make there. Okay guys, I'm just going to do a quick recap on everything that I've done to actually make this run. The first job really is I'd set all the preliminary settings, so that was the mix adjustment screw. I turned it out 3 turns. The air intake was in until it was seated. And the sort of throttle speed stop was touching plus half a turn. At the back here, where the accelerator cable comes in, there is an adjustment there at the back there, so you can tighten this up and get the revs up to about 1500 RPM. Whilst you're doing that, then it's a case of balancing side to side using the adjustment down here, and then once you've done that, you've got the adjustments front and back. Now you've got this connecting rod here. Now the mistake I made was I was trying to turn the bull cup, which is not how you do it. There's 2 nuts there, undo that, and then you can rotate this bar slightly. Just turn it one way or the other until the front and back are balanced. The next thing is to balance the 2 chokes of the individual carb. Now you take your readings, and whichever is the highest, so remember I was using the airflow meter, so you take whichever one of these chokes is reading the highest, and then you loosen off your air bypass screw slightly. Obviously you undo the retaining nut first, until they are then balanced, and then tighten it back up again. That should then be about it. Next stage after that is tuning the mix, the idle mix, which was down here. Now on my car I've had to undo these an extra 2 turns, so overall they are 5 turns out. Now I believe that every car is different, and don't get me wrong, this is not tuned up to 100%. It's running well, but now to make sure, I think you need to listen to each of these chokes, and as an expert's ear will know whether it's taking in too much or too little, and then they will fine-tune the idle mixture for each one of those chokes going round. Now the issues I was having, it was too lean to start with, so it was revving too high. I couldn't get the revs back down again. It's still revving a little bit high. It's ticking over about 1000 RPM, which is a little bit on the high side, but that's now down to the expert. I've taken it as far as I can, and I'm quite happy with what I've achieved here. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and look out for the next one. But again, until next time, thanks for watching. Take care.